My name's Shane Morris, and this is my testimony. I just wanted to take some time to just not overthink it and talk too much, but just to speak from my heart and just to give an account of what's changed in my life over the last 5 years. And I don't know who it's supposed to reach. I don't know who, maybe people that were in a similar situation as me, or I don't know. Maybe this will reach people that used to know me, or maybe people that never will. Um, but I just hope that the Lord gets glory in this, and that I can just testify to the great things He's done in my life. So, for those who don't know, I've lived in Missouri pretty much my whole life. I was born and raised in there, and I lived in Rogersville, Missouri pretty much that whole time. I mean, I went through a small town, population like 2,000, went K through 12 like a lot of people, many of my graduating class were, and graduated in 2007, and I stayed in town, and I, went to college there, went to community college for a year, and went to the big university there in town, and ended up graduating from there. So, born and raised and stayed, and I never had any plans on leaving. It was good. The Midwest is a pretty good area to grow up in, and especially that area. Um, I was also raised by a single father. Um, my head's, our it was just us, like, pretty much that whole time. Uh, Hardworking. We never had a lot of money. I grew up in trailers. By humble means, not having a bunch. And I guess the backstory of that is that my birth mother, when I was a little less than 2 years old, made the decision to leave our family. And it's a bit of a short summary for uh, an amazing situation, which only would happen by God giving favor. Because, well, you know how statistics are. Usually it's a single mother a lot of the time, but not always. And, we were in another country my dad was not a citizen of, and all he wanted was me, given the situation. All he wanted was family. But when it came down to it, it was like he gave up everything for me, to have me, to be able to keep me, and God gave him favor, and he got to do so. So, you know, um, long story short, we came back after a short time over there. Her family is originally from another country, and she would wanted to go back there with us, and then after a short time, we came back, me and my dad, that is, and he just started over, with a just started over with just me, and he was glad with for that. And I had his mother and father. My grandparents were also a huge part of my childhood, and I so grateful to have them. Like, those three were like the ones, that I saw on a regular basis, and they were all three of them were all in for me. And we I look back with fond memories of all that. It's like we had very little. Like, all my friends that I can ever remember, pretty much for the most part, they financially wise, they were pretty well off. They had nice cars, whatever, really, just whatever, anything. They wanted to buy something, they could get it, and all that. I don't mean they're all a bunch of spoiled brats or anything. It's just whatever. That's what I was used to. But I say that as I look back, and that I was really grateful for all that time, being used to having little. Then you don't want as much. But it was a struggle. Not that, I mean, I always ate. I was provided for, and I just had a dad that worked his tail off his whole life. Um, I mean, for me, but the fact that it's like he cared about the work he did, whatever it was. And yeah, I guess for the whole core of where this is moving, it's this whole story is that, you know, 5 years ago, my life changed in the natural, completely unexplainably. It just everything changed. Well, I guess we're fast forwarding here, but God called me like literally as plain and clear as if a switch flicked. It was on July 5th, 2015, when everything changed. And everything changed. And I wish I could. I'll try to explain, really. It's easy to say that a switch flicked and I'm a born again Christian, because that's a phrase you hear, and it's usually they'll use in a mocking way. Maybe it's because a lot of born again Christians, they aren't actually born again. They start going to church or something, but it's like, it's a veil. Not all. Like any actual born again Christians, everyone knows there's a difference. Even the ones that don't want to pay attention too close, believers, unbelievers, whatever. But everything changed for me, and everyone around me knew it. Everything changed. And I guess jumping back, it's like I never really, maybe in my head when I was younger, had kind of maybe at times convinced myself that I was a Christian. Maybe. I don't think I did too much, but I know I had moments where I was like, yeah, I'm a Christian. But for the most part, I was like, I knew that would be a phony statement to actually think that. Especially to say it. Like, I can't recall myself actually saying like I'm a Christian, except for in like one or two moments when I was just being ridiculous. But my dad did everything he could to set the right example in regards to that faith, living for God, being a Christian, like an actual Christian, not just going to church. He tried to get me to go to church, because it's like, God has a body and he has a church, and there are circumstances where people don't get to have a body, but that's what he intends. There's many members, one body. And so, I can't remember what age it was when I was young still. He started going back to church because, the main thing was like, he's like, hypocrites or not, I'm not going to change anything from the outside. So, yeah, he's been back ever since. Being a faithful member of his church. Same church he went to, he's still going to today. The same one. And eventually, he never tried to pressure me to go to church. He really wanted to lead by example. I could tell, like, not wanted to be very careful for me to make that own decision myself and not him make it for me. But I started going eventually. It's almost like it was like a guilt thing, maybe, partly. But back in my head, I was like, I should be there. So how many times did I just sleep in on a Sunday? But then something finally, at some point in high school, I started going consistently. And, I tried to always listen to what the pastor was preaching and stuff, but I was never really in it. Man, it was like I never read my Bible. It's like when I did, it just felt like, ugh, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, at one point in their life at least. If not now, still. But yeah, and then at one point in high school, in 8th grade when I was young, I kind of got involved in, a little bit of mischievous behavior, not like doing any, vandalizing things or anything dramatic like that, but, drinking, smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, for a period of time. And then sometime, it was probably when I joined cross country, which I've really appreciated that I did that. I literally fell into it, didn't know what cross country was, and I showed up, and then, oh man, I really loved that coach too. His name was Kevin Boyer, and I look back, I was just thinking about him the other day about like, I just appreciated him as a person, and he kind of drew me into it, and I didn't know what cross country was, and I show up, and He's like, go run 2 miles. And I was like, what? This is what it is. It's running. It's not just like, hey, fun exercise. It's like, this is what it is. And I was a shy kid still then, so I just did it. And then did it for 2 years. And taught me a lot as I learned. Especially, more importantly, I think the most important lesson I got from all that was that it taught me about pain management. That translates over than just exercise, as I learned not until probably the last couple years, 2 or 3 years or something. But that may have been part of that point where I started getting out of the doing other, drinking, smoking, whatever. And I remember I started hanging out with some good influences on me. There was a guy that was a grade older than me, and he was in cross country too, which I don't think I remember finding out until I showed up to that camp and he was there. And we had ridden the same bus, so at that point, I think he was driving. So I kind of was like, hey, you want to keep me from riding the bus? And I started hanging out with him, and he was a Christian. His family's a Christian, and he's invited me to his church, which I didn't go to on Sundays, but I started going there on Wednesday nights. And then I started hanging out with him and his group of friends, and they were some really good people that had a really good influence on me. And I hung out with them for a couple years. So through high school, I was like, I think that was mainly like probably a socializing thing. Like, I liked the influence they had on me. I felt like an oddball. I felt like the odd man out all the time with them, pretty much. But I always felt welcomed. I always felt like they really did care about me. And I really appreciated that. And I really loved them. I look back with very fond memories of that. But I always felt like I'm a phony. Like, I know what's going on in here. And I knew, like, this is a facade. This is not me. So anyway, I hung out with them. All of them were either a grade or 2 grades above me. So the time came eventually where they weren't in the same school as me. They were going to college and everything. So, I kind of just went through the motions of being a teenager, And then as soon as graduation of high school came, I was moved out as soon. Not like I had some oppressive dad. I actually had a really patient father. He was big on discipline and everything, but very patient. I look back and he did stuff that's just crazy to me. Like, I didn't even realize it until I was like in my 20s, but I was like, he used to let me blare music in my room and never said one time about it. And I remember I was like, that's crazy, because that stuff annoys me to all can be. I like quiet. And I'm sure he does too. But he was like, I didn't like it when my parents told me not to turn my music down. So, anyway, though, that's not the reason. I just moved out because I'm ready to be fake freedom, and, it wasn't long before then. Everybody's ready for the party scene and all that. And it was exciting at first, but I think after about a semester of college, I hated the party scene. I pretty much hated everything. And that just grew and grew and grew. It was just like, I kind of always had an anger, like a deep rage within me that was like always around. Probably even as a kid, I can kind of remember that. But it didn't really start developing until probably like teenage years, especially like after that. Like when I started getting into my 20s, like it really became more apparent because there was just no fulfillment in anything. Like I said, the party thing that lasted a semester before I was like, I hate this. Like, this is not fun. It was just like, it just felt empty, Not that I didn't appreciate friends. I had a couple really great friends that, man, I always look back fondly with people that even people I weren't close to, sometimes just an acquaintance, like somebody I work with, but like any kind of genuine person, like any kind of genuine personality, like genuine. I don't mean some perfect person that never makes mistakes, but it's like I always loved that, even if I didn't know them. But I just had this huge hatred for the whole world. It just grew, and especially as I was getting my 22, and beyond. That was probably when things got the darkest, when I became like around 22. And I just, I just felt like I just could see through everything and how ridiculous everything was. Like, not that I wasn't doing the same thing myself in a different way, but it just felt like nothing is fulfilling. Nothing is fulfilling. So it's like, and I said I had moved out. It's like not for that long after that, I was like, oh yeah, smoking marijuana is a thing. So I'd been doing that for years, off and on sometimes, but pretty consistently. It's just a crutch is what I used it as, because my mind was just never stops and, thinking. And when there's not anything good inside, you want to do whatever you can to not think at all, as little as possible. So that helped with that. And then depression, anxiety was kind of always a thing with me. I could always deal though. Like, I'd have, I'm not saying I've had it like some people I know have deal with anxiety where it's like, it's very intense. I can recall whatever the most intense episodes of anxiety I had were. I just remember it being so insane. Like, I felt like, I don't know, it's about to lock up, about to the point in like maybe at work situations, whatever it is. And it was like, came to a point of like realizing to some extent what's going on and just literally being like, this is not real, this is not real right now. Like, you've got control of this situation. But part of the reason that those episodes ever happened were because that was after depression had really set in with me. And I mean, I look back and everything has an effect on you. I know, like, my mother not being there in my childhood, like, that has an effect, but that was never a constant thought of like, my mom left me, oh my gosh, unbelievable, because of the example my father had set. Like, never once did I ever hear him say one bad thing about her, ever. Which is, I doubt I would have been able to do that, but that has a huge effect too. So, given the situation, all that, he raised me as right as I can imagine that he could. I'm sure he looks back and like, oh, I made mistakes or whatever, but I look back and I just think about all the things he did that translates to how I view my Heavenly Father. Because we do things like that in the natural, as I realized over the years. We can't help it. So it's like, we can't help but like, we try to understand God, the Father, and try to understand Him, and we can't really in the natural. Like, we're limited in everything, but it's like, so what do? We got to start somewhere to try to figure this out, to unpack it. And so we look at our earthly father and go from there. So that's why it's like, if somebody didn't have a father at all around, or like had an abusive father, or someone just a non-existent one, just kind of not playing the role, I mean, of course they got that can only make it more difficult, So I feel like I was very blessed and favored in that I could look at him and never did I ever have to doubt if I could trust him or not. He was there through my darkest times, like through those years of depression. If there was someone I was going to, it was him. I mean, geez, obviously you drank heavy. That's just it's one of those silly things that go hand in hand with depression a lot of the time, where sometimes it just comes out while you're not necessarily playing, like, oh, I'm drinking because I'm sad, but you're like in a social thing. That was my thing. That was a lot of Irish exits, as they call the phrase, where someone just disappears. That would happen because it would come out. A lot of really, I was protected by God enormously, many times in my life. I mean, but without this series of like me doing stupid things and getting like, I was a teenager and I got into a wreck and hitting somebody in the back of a car. It was raining, and totaled his car just because the trunk was so messed up that it was totaled, and my head like shattered the windshield. I didn't go flying out. I thought I remember having my seatbelt on, but apparently not. But I just stopped. Like the windshield was pushed out because of where my head had pushed it out, but I didn't fly through. And I didn't go to the hospital. And I didn't have a concussion. I mean, I had glass embedded in my forehead for a couple days. No, nothing wrong. No neck, no back. Okay. A four-wheeler incident, where the brakes weren't stopping fast enough, and it was too late. There was like trees kind of close together off on the sides, and it was too late to turn left. But then there was a big, huge, like a barbed wire fence, but these big, huge, like almost like wood pillars with the barbed wire wrapped real tight around them and strung. And then it went through it, and then at the end it had like really close together two of the wooden pillars with tight barbed wire, and I ran through it completely, which is a miracle. I mean, I went through it, and like I just instinctively leaned back. I had a helmet on, and the barbed wire literally dragged my entire body, and even with the strap on, pulled the helmet off, and nothing but a couple cuts here and here. I think I still have a mark, But then it's like the things that I actually did throughout that time, as like I was talking about, I'd just disappear because things would come out where, like once I remember people I worked with were like, let's go to so-and-so's apartment and party or whatever. A few people hanging out and having drinks, and I just, who can remember? I was just a blackout king for a while, basically. It's just like treating it like to a race where I was pretty much like, it's like, it wasn't a competition, but it was almost just like you're just trying to numb yourself as much as possible. And I just remember like, I probably hadn't even eaten dinner that night, having all who knows how many shots and whatever. And then next thing I know, I'm coming to walking on the highway on I-44 at night. It's probably 2 or 3 in the morning. Phone screen's like shattered. Hardly can tell what's on it. And I called my dad, and he, somehow found me. At one point I'm walking, and he's like, I'm like saying like, I don't know where I am. If I wasn't so belligerently drunk, it would have been as embarrassing as could be. It was the next day. I remember anytime these kind of things happen, I'd wake up the next day and like, oh, just absolute, the most cringing, oh. He found me by like mile markers or something, and that's not even the worst. There were a handful of those kind of nights. That wasn't consistent, but there was more than a couple, that's for sure. There was 5 to 10 or something, I don't know. But then there was plenty of other times where I didn't call him, But I'm just saying, like, we were that close, like my father, But I don't know. I don't want to just tell stories for like some kind of shock effect, but I feel like some of these things, I feel like maybe the Lord allowed me to remember for my own sake, and it is part of my testimony. Because, I mean, I've never been to the hospital for as much as I've drank, but I've drank copious amounts, and that would have killed a lot of people. I don't know how. I don't know how I'm alive today, other than God's grace. But another part of these stories is that, like, I know that there's a lot of depression in the world, probably more than ever before, and there's a reason for that. So I know some of these things probably already seem well, people may watch this video and they're like well acquainted with these feelings, but it's one of these things that are really hard to describe, where it's like complete emptiness, complete lack of fulfillment in absolutely anything, drunk or sober, awake or asleep, like not being able to get out of the bed, like finding a reason how to get out of the bed today. And it's like, it's a fighting spirit my Father here on earth placed in me, like, don't let the world win. And that, it became to that point after the struggle where it was like, I'm not going to let this world win. I don't know how I'm going to keep going, because I know like everything I'm feeling is having a literal physical effect on me. Depression, anxiety, rage, anger, whatever. Like it has an effect on your organs, literally, on your brain, on... And other than that, it's like you can be the strongest person in the world, but it's like you can only keep it going for so long. Eventually there's going to be a point to where you just don't have it in you. And I think I came as close to that point as I could possibly be, and still be here today in 2020, sitting here in a chair talking to a camera. You know, only God saw me at the worst, only. But as far as like a human being, like my father, he is the only person that saw even somewhat close to that. And there's this one episode, I don't know how I remembered it all. I have to assume it's because it helped me learn something, because I was completely blacked out and there's no reason at all I should remember it, because I can not really remember after that and not really before. Just pieces, but I remember this one moment vividly, even in that state. So it was winter, it was cold, and I couldn't find my keys. And I couldn't find my keys and get into my apartment. So, of course, I called my dad, and bless his heart, no father should have to deal with these things. Parent at all. And he ended up coming from home. I know I woke him up because it's late at night already. We looked, and whatever. I believe that same night I didn't even know where my car was. Couldn't remember where my car was. And, he got in the truck and he was taking me out to Rogersville, the same place I spent my childhood. And he, we were going, and I knew at that point he was remarried to my current stepmother now. And they had been married, and, he was like, I'll just bring you home. We'll figure it out. We'll get it in the morning. And I was like, no. I was pushing back. I was like, listen, we'll find the keys. We'll find the keys. Like, just don't. We don't. Because I probably didn't even express it because I wouldn't have wanted to. But I knew, like, we were going back there, and she was there. And it's not just her. My stepsister was there, who at that time was probably like 13 or something like that, 13 or 14 years old. And it's like, just the thought of like anyone seeing that mess I was, other than him, I didn't like him seeing it. Even as close as we were, like best friends, grew up together. I mean, I was like, nobody else is seeing this. Like, I was like, he hasn't even seen it all. But I was like, this is the one admission ticket to this show. Like, no one else can see this. Even if they didn't see it that night, it's like the next day thinking about dealing with that. It's so crazy how even in that belligerent state I was processing all that. And I mean, that's a 55-mile-per-hour highway, and I just tried to get out of the truck because he was just going home, and he kept pushing, and I just tried to step out of the truck. I was like, I don't care. Obviously, I was belligerent, but it's like, I was like, I don't care. I'm stepping out of this truck. And he had dad reflexes like no one I've ever seen in my life. And he, while driving 55 miles an hour, jumped over, grabbed a hold of my pea coat, and pulled me back, and with the door open, and pulled me back in, and like the truck went off the road, and he was fighting to gain control of it and keep me in the vehicle, and it was like almost spun out of control, and he got it back on the road. And I mean, it's unbelievable he was able to do that. But the fact that he had to go through that, just to give you an idea of like some of the real world actual things that were going on in that time. But the most ridiculous thing about that story too is that my keys were in my coat the whole time. Because still to this day, I have that pea coat and there's a giant hole in the pocket. And if you put keys in the left pocket, it just falls right inside the jacket. So he took me back to my apartment, and that was that night. And I know that, that's probably the hardest night as a father he's ever had to deal with. And I know he prayed so much for me over the years that I would get right with God and I'd live for God, and however ways he prayed it, that was it. Like a lot of those dark nights, call him in the middle of the night, just crying, just because everything comes out. That's the terrible thing about alcohol too, is like when you're depressed, it just brings it out. Even if you're like the party with the people I was talking about, I got to a point, it's like your sobriety's gone, whatever's inside, it's coming out. It's coming out unhindered. And so that's why it's like those nights, it's like I would, not every time or anything, because you would have gotten thousands of calls. Maybe thousands, hundreds, lots. But yeah, I'd call him and I always remember that. I always remember him. Well, if you thought about going to God, or whatever. However he said it, that was always what he tried to. But he tried to do it gently, and because he knew it was a delicate situation. But, back in then 2015, it's like I was always thinking, like, money was always tight, so I always had kitchen jobs, and those were always really brutal, working hard, and it just kind of adds. It's just an amplification effect. You're always looking for a reason to why I'm more depressed now. It's just when there's nothing there's just a void. So you think like, if I make more money, get a good job, and it never works out. Because I graduated, and then I got a better job at like a web design company, not making a whole lot, but I was like, at least I'm not working nights anymore. Kind of get some structure to my week, but there's still things. I got a little like more level-headed. It's also at that point I think I stopped drinking so much. Still smoking weed, of course. I had to have some kind of crutch. Smoking cigarettes and dipping, so of course got some kind of crutches. But at least it wasn't quite like it was. But I still had the emptiness. And then I find a good job that I was with for years as a tech writer. That's what I got my degree in. And I got on right after I left that other place. And then I was like, this is by far the best job I've ever had. I was with them for up until 2019, I believe. Yeah, so about a year ago. And it was good. And I went full time. And even then, it was kind of like, this is great. It really helped keep me down, and still had my vices and everything, of course. Didn't give those up. But still, it's like I was going through the motions. It was just like the next phase in it, like, wow, going through the motions. And then, like I said the date earlier, it's like July 5th, 2015. Like a switch flicked in me, and God called. I knew in the back of my head, like, you should do this. You should do this. You should do this. But it was like, it wasn't the right time. That was the time for me. And I woke up one day and I was like, God said, wake up. And it was time. I was like, it's time. That time's come. In the back of my head, I knew it was coming. It's come. And I repented of my sin in tears and received Jesus, and really did. And I didn't know what was going on exactly, because it's like I was dipped in water, baptized when I was a teenager, but I did it out of like guilt. And I didn't know this stuff until months had passed, and I started realizing like I wasn't ever really baptized. I never made the confession. My heart was never changed. That's why I always felt like I was a phony, because I was a phony. I was playing a part because I felt like I had to. So it's like when I went up there, I remember being embarrassed because I was 17. That's a young age to go up there and be baptized as a senior in high school. And I was like, geez, these people always did that. Like, that's pitiful. That's also a young age to make that confession, because Who even knows what they're going to do as a career at 16 years old, 17. But I realized, oh yeah, that's why the heart has to be changed, and it was changed. And I can't explain it. Anybody that's had a heart change knows what I'm talking about. They're smiling, thinking about this, because they're recounting when their heart was changed. New life was given. And for the first time, I wanted to be alive. For the first time in my life, ever. Felt joy for the first time. Just waking up that day, I was like, finally, this is what is going on. This is what it's all about. And I was like, whatever now. No cares or concerns. Had a job and everything. You do the things you're supposed to do. Obviously, nothing silly like that. But it's like, I'm cool, Whatever, Lord, what do you want me to do, It's like, I feel like that proverb was the big, huge verse that I just stuck to because I never read my Bible. I knew nothing, I was just like, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. And that got me through that time. It got me through the next few months to do things that really made me uncomfortable in parts, and I didn't understand. And it was so great, I hope that the people I was friends with at that time, like, watch this. That's the great thing about these testimony videos. It's not like you're cornering somebody and go, let me tell you about my testimony, But you get to they can just watch it whenever, and it's no pressure. But it's like, I know I was living with a guy I love very much, like a friend. And, I don't want to label him as atheist because I don't think he would probably agree with that. As far as I can tell, he was, or agnostic or something like that. But he's probably, it was a little uncomfortable because, I was hanging out with people that we were all doing the same thing. Some of those guys I lived with for years, drinking, smoking, all this, just the party. It's just, that's just like a normal thing now. It's like you're drinking to excess, smoking weed, whatever. Just kind of doing whatever. I was always the oddball with them too. I never fitted into that group. I really loved spending time with those guys. I loved a lot of the time just our hanging out together at the house and stuff. I appreciate a lot of things about them. But I think they'd probably agree. Like, I was never like, I was like a freaking elf, sore thumb sticking out, whatever. Just like that group when I was younger, that was a good influence on me. And then the friends I had in high school, I graduated with, like, I was the oddball out in every group, and I finally understood why. It's because of, like, I'm now in Russellville, Arkansas, where I never knew existed until 5 years ago, and now I live here. It's just unbelievable. And this is where God placed me to be in. This is this local body, this congregation, like, where God placed me to be in. But yeah, when everything changed, it was like, I feel like I look back and I really try to, I've had a lot of prayers where I'm like, God, can you bring me back to that time? Like, you always want to keep growing, but it's like I look back at those times and go, like, I didn't know anything, and I was okay with that because I knew, like, God's grace surrounded me, and like, He had my back no matter what, and like, Jesus died for me, and that was all. Like, nothing was shaking that. And I was like, there was no overthinking. Like, it was like anything I did, it was like, God, you're done stupid about it. Because I people can say, like, oh, Lord's telling me this, Lord's telling me this. It wasn't like, when you're sincere. Like, sincerity is the key to true Christianity. Like, that's where it starts. If you're just sincere, in wanting the truth, like a simple and pure devotion, and you're sincere, like, in the heart, not with your words, like, I feel like it always falls into place. I mean, people can be sincerely deceived. That's what I mean is like, if you make, like, you make a decision, like, I want the truth, and whatever it means, like, it's a little scary, but it's like, that's what I want. And that's what I said when I became a Christian. I was like, I don't know anything, Lord. I just want the truth. Like, I just want the truth. I just want what's right. I want what's right. And if I got to change some stuff, then so what? So I threw away my dip can and my pack of cigarettes. I stopped smoking weed. I was like, I don't need these things anyway. I was like, yeah, my flesh liked them. I was like, this is great. But I was like, I don't need them anyway. So, I quit that all. I quit it all. And then, it wasn't a month and a half after that day, July 5th, 2015, that it's a complete mystery, and I've got a great memory, but all of a sudden, I had PTO, paid time off for the first time in my life at that job, and I go, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but I've got 2 weeks, so if I just take time off, I'm going to pray a bunch, read the Bible, whatever, because everything, I was like, that's what, I got time off, this is what it's getting used for the Lord. And next thing I know, I realized I'm supposed to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. I was like, these seem really important. They seem like they mean something important. And so obviously then I start seeing about the Day of Atonement and Feast of Trumpets, and I don't know what these mean yet, but without any doubt I was like, I'm supposed to keep these. Like, nobody told me to do it. Like, I don't understand it at all. I've never heard them spoken about in any sermon I've ever heard in my life. But I was absolute conviction, like, I'm supposed to keep these, and I didn't keep them right. I didn't even know what I was supposed to do, but I was like, well, I can see I'm not supposed to work on these days, so I didn't work on those days. Atonement, I didn't keep a convocation. Again, I was like, I just know I'm not supposed to work, so it's like, and apparently I'm supposed to fast, so I fasted, not knowing what it all meant at the time. And then Feast of Tabernacles, you're supposed to keep it somewhere, and I was like, I have no money. I had no money. I was looking up places online, like, where can I keep this Feast of Tabernacles? And there's like places like, come to the Holiday Inn in Niagara Falls. And I was like, this. Plus, it seemed empty. Anyway, not that it's wrong to keep it there, but everything I looked at, the handful maybe, places that I looked, I was like, oh, this seems like kind of like just a time thing. And I was like, I don't know what this means, but I know it means something powerful. And next thing I know, I come across the Crusade Church, Holy Days 2015, and he had like a schedule prints out like he always does with different stuff, different days, but pretty much every day except for one, there's a sermonette or an offertory a couple days, sermon, the 2 holy days, there's an afternoon service, but there's worship. That was the thing, is like worship, and here's this, and people gathering together, fellowship, come expecting to be blessed. And I was like, oh right, this seems sincere. And I called, and Larry answered the phone, the pastor, and I just knew right in that second that I was supposed to go there. Like, I was like, I know I'm supposed to keep it. Don't know what I'm going to do. I was like, literally, I had a passing thought, like, am I supposed to camp in my dad's property or something? Because I didn't know where to go. But I was convicted enough, like, I got to keep this, even if it's by myself in a tent. Thank the Lord that was not the case. But, yeah, and I still didn't know, but I was like, I had the absolute certainty I was supposed to be there. And thankfully, it wasn't like I had to wait months. I only had to wait like another month after that. And every couple weeks, I'm messaging him like 2 weeks away, 1 week away. And then at the beginning of that first sermon on the very first day, everything made sense when he was talking about the wedding and how there are invited guests and there's a groom and there's a bride. And everyone's glad to be there at the wedding, but the invited guests don't want to be the bride, and the bride certainly doesn't want to be the invited guests, and the groom doesn't want to be with anyone else other than that bride that is standing up there on that wedding. And it was right then and there, that I knew, like, I mean, just floods. And I was like, thank you, Lord. This wasn't making a lot of sense. I was nervous, but I just, I met my people. Got a lot more people I haven't met, but I've met these ones. I just felt the Lord's presence at that place that whole time, like I've never felt in my life. You can't just describe the Lord's presence. You can't. Just like I can't just describe like what accurately with words, like when heart was changed, when I felt like I wanted to be alive for the first time, when I felt like I felt joy for the first time, when I felt God's grace, when I felt the certainty, the truth that I was covered by the blood of Christ, because I received Him in truth. And yeah, the rest is really just history. I just remember halfway through that feast, I was like, I got to figure out how to move down here, but I don't know how I'm going to do it. I had 2.5 hours of sleep after that last great day, because it was a 4.5 hour drive from Searcy, Arkansas to Springfield, and I had to work the next day, and I had 2.5 hours of sleep because I couldn't hardly bring myself to leave that place. I think I ended up leaving at like 11 o'clock, and man, I was crying so hard having to lead them like a little kid. Man, it was painful. Like that whole day. I was baptized that day for real this time. On the last great day, I was baptized. But I'm here now, and I didn't have to wait that long, I moved down. That last great day, I believe, fell on October 5th. That was the day I was baptized, is October 5th, 2015. And I got to move down the following March. Even got to see my beloved brother get married to his wife right after, like a week after we moved back and moved into the house where I am currently in right now. I have another brother who has filmed his own testimony a while back that I live with, that God brought him from Los Angeles, California to live here right at the same time. I don't want to go with this too long because I have a bad habit of going too long and ranting once I actually get in a talking mood. But I just want to end this with something I really learned about something something I learned about the hard times in the past that I had been through and what it helped me learn about the Lord. So in all those years of depression as they went on, like I always had that emptiness, I always had that, but what really made things the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and through that time was about 22 when I said things got really bad, was that like I had my heart broken by someone I loved very much, I cared about very much, and I feel led to talk about this, and I feel like I have to have a disclaimer with a lot of things I say. It's not something I've really hardly ever talked about with anybody, not much anyway, in very, very little bits, because God has a right way of doing things in all things. The times can change, society can change, but God's always had a standard. Like He is, there's a right and a wrong way to do things. So, that's why I'm like always hesitant to talk about it, because I don't ever want to endorse sinful behavior, or like unrighteous things. Not that I don't do these things on a like sin any given day of the week, but to endorse it and go give my stamp of approval, it's just not something I want to do. But the thing is, it's like I've made many mistakes in my life. I've learned from them. And it was an unrighteous relationship. It wasn't the right situation to be in. It was people don't like to hear it. It was sin, that's what it was, period. And I really don't care. how that makes people feel. That was the truth. But there is a part of it, it's like a portion of it. It was selfish love, But even in the fall, like, God didn't make us, just like he didn't make us to die. Like, he didn't make us, like, we still have the pieces of us, even when we're lost, the pieces of God that are in the world left, even in this wicked world as it is. So it's like, there's a part of it that it's like, you just can't ignore. But it's like, that's why there's a right and a wrong way to do things. So with that said, it was somebody I'd known since it was a girl I'd known since I was like 13 or 14 years old. So it wasn't as if it was just a fling or anything like that. It was unbelievable how many times we'd crossed our paths over the year just by chance in completely different times of my life. And at one point we'd been together for a while, a couple years pretty much. And it's like, I was no pushover in my life, but if there was one person I was ever pushover, it was her. And I saw myself in that time frame do things I never thought I would do for like anybody, to let myself be taken advantage of in certain ways. Not that she was like merciless, like some kind of malicious intent only kind of, not that. It's just we're all a mess. so it's like, I was a mess, she was a mess, and that's just the way it was. But I just saw myself like unbelievable, like having patience I never knew I had, all kinds of different stuff, like to try to care for her, to try to, again, it was a selfish love. But it's like, I just look back and I was like, I never did that with anybody else in my life. Like, I would have been like sworn a person off and had nothing to do with them, but I cared for her a lot. And it's like, no matter what I did, she kind of always evaded in a way. And it's not, there's no way I can accurately describe what I mean, but it was just kind of like that. Maybe part of it was being scared of like somebody that was like for real, like willing to, I don't know, commit maybe or something. And there was a little bit of fear of that, like things like that, something like that becoming too real. So the main thing I learned from all that, which is the whole reason I bring all this up, other than the fact like it was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. And yes, I had all that other stuff surrounding it, depression and anxiety, but it's like that itself was the hardest thing I've ever experienced in my life. There's no pain like a broken heart. There really, as far as my own experience, there is no pain like a broken heart. But I realized that like the Lord has his heart broken every single day, 1,000,000 times over. And he has, ever since the fall. And he has done and is doing and will do everything possible to get our heart. Like he's done everything. That's why he did the cross. He didn't just do the cross. He spent a life. It's not just it's not just on the hill. It wasn't just on the cross. And it wasn't just the scourging that he took before the cross. He spent his whole life being what he needed to be for us. If anybody takes nothing else from this testimony, like take this, like what matters more than anything is knowing Jesus, is knowing him. That is the best gift I've ever known at all. Like that's why I learned from this. Like having my heart broken is he's had it broken. It's being broken now. It will be broken. He knows this. He knew it all. When the tribulation happens and the time is coming, there are people that no matter what, they will not repent. All repent means is turn from your sin. Just turn from the sin. Turn away from it. Just turn from it. Because when you turn away from it, you turn to God. He just wants to know us. That's the best gift I've ever had. It's not being saved from hell. It's not. It's not. I can only say it with words. It's not just being saved. We can't just do it to be saved. We can't. It can't be the only reason. I get so mad now because of what this Christianity in this nation has caused today. It's be saved, be saved, be saved, which is what he did it for. But that's not the main thing. It's not the main thing. It's knowing the Lord, knowing him. He wants to be intimate forever. Intimate. That's why I feel like I'm getting stirred up now thinking about it, because I just think about when it makes the gospel, I feel like it makes the gospel into like a candy store of like our own worldly desires. Like, it's like I picture like in that paradigm, when you don't bring the intimacy of Jesus and knowing him into our salvation, then it's like, I picture like in heaven, Jesus is just hanging out around and people see him and he just does like a wave and he's like, yeah, I did it, man. You're welcome. Maybe that sounds stupid or whatever, but I don't think so. I am far from a good example of seeking the Lord diligently every day of my life, but I know that that's what he wants. He wants to be as close to you and I to where light cannot be seen between, because you're that close. And I just wish I don't have the words to say how grateful I am. He's given me more. He's given me things I never asked for. He gave me this body, this family, who I know I can rely on. When it comes to it, I can rely on them. I didn't have a mother, and he gave me one. Never thought I would ever want sisters in my life, but he's given me them. I never had a brother in my life, and he's given me many. In my whole life, I never wanted riches really, because I never had them or whatever. But it's like, if there was one tangible thing in life that I wanted, the only thing it would ever been was like a wife. Like my teammate, my partner, someone to just be in it with through. But then that day changed, and that was the first time in my life since I had become, it's not like I woke, came out of the womb and go, I want a wife. I'm like, since my 20s that I said, you know what, I don't know if that's meant to be. But greater than that, he gave me himself. So that's what I say about my testimony that preaches to me over and over again, and is the main point, is knowing Jesus. That there's an open door. There is an open door for everyone on earth to know Jesus. Not just to be saved, but to know him. And yeah, there's work. There's work. There's work to be done. That's the thing. Is when you know the Lord, like he wants you to be one with him. And he gives himself. He gives his all. Everything. Well, that's the thing, is a bride and a groom are joined to be one. The devil skewed marriage in this world. It's sickening. Marriage on this world is just a shadow of a heavenly reality. Jesus is going to join his bride, and she will be pure. They are going to be one, just as he said. I want them to be as one as you and I are one, so that we may be one together. Like, that's the way it is. So it's like knowing Jesus. Well, yeah, there's going to be work on earth, but it's for his glory. He gets all the glory. He deserves it all. He deserves it all. He deserves it all. I'm so thankful that even in all that darkness and all that black and all that emptiness. I'm so thankful for all the pain. I'm so thankful for all the pain that I've had because he spins gold out of it. That's just the way he works. It's only because of my own experiences, everything I've already been through, that makes me actually want more pain, because I know he will always do something with it. I just thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I hope it speaks to you as much as it has to me, and it still does. He's just never going to give up on you, and he's never going to give up on me. Only we can give up on him. I know. And if you commit your heart to the Lord, it's your heart, not your deeds or your flesh, your heart, he will do things with you that you never knew were possible. I know that the time is coming when, the Lord's return is coming. It seems more and more imminent. We don't know the day or hour. It's coming soon, but I just pray that there would not be a person left, anyone that has a desire to know him, that they would know that the door is open. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I just pray that the Lord gets glory in it all. I love you.